Anna hit the pavement hard, her palms scraping against the wet concrete as the apartment door slammed behind her. The rain didn't wait for her to stand. It poured over her like the sky itself was trying to wash away the last 3 years of her life. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't even look back. She just pushed herself up slowly, her breath trembling, but her spine straight. Her suitcase sat beside her like a witness to her humiliation. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Not to clear tears she refused to shed any, but to clear the rain that blurred her vision. Her husband's voice still echoed behind the door, muffled but sharp enough to cut through her chest. "You don't fit my world anymore, Anna. I need someone who matches my future." Someone who matched his boardroom meetings. Someone who looked good beside him in corporate photos. Someone who wasn't her. She let out a breath that fogged in the cold air. 3 years, she whispered to herself. 3 years I gave you. She didn't say it with regret. She said it with disbelief, because she had truly believed he would be the man who made her laugh for eternity. She had believed in him more than he ever believed in himself. She had held him through failures, celebrated his wins, and built a home with him brick by emotional brick. And he threw her out like she was nothing. Anna straightened her shoulders. She was dark-skinned, beautiful, and proud of where she came from. She never begged for love. She never chased validation. She knew her value. And if he couldn't see it, that was his blindness, not her flaw. A car drove past, splashing water near her feet. She didn't flinch. She just picked up her suitcase and walked away from the building without looking back once. She didn't need to see the door to know it was closed. She felt it. She felt the finality of it in her bones. But she also felt something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the soft, gentle kind. The sharp kind. The kind that comes after a chain snaps. She walked down the dimly lit street, her heels clicking against the pavement, her breath steadying with every step. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't need to. Her mind was already drifting to the truth she had buried deep inside herself. She wasn't just Anna, the wife who tried her best. She was Anna, the half-sister of the most ruthless Mafia leader in Asia, the true heir to the Queen Empire, the woman whose bloodline commanded fear and respect in every shadowed corner of the underground world. But she had walked away from all of it. She had chosen a normal life. She had chosen love over power. And her family, dangerous, loyal, and fiercely protective, had agreed to let her go. They promised never to interfere unless she called. And she never did. Not once. Not even when her marriage began to crack. Not even when she felt herself disappearing inside a life that didn't deserve her. But tonight was different. She stopped under a flickering streetlight, her breath visible in the cold air. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over a number she was never supposed to use. A number tied not to her family, but to him, Hyun, the Korean Mafia boss she once saved by accident. The man who looked at her like she was a storm he wanted to walk into. The man who told her, in a voice that felt like a promise, "If you ever need me, even once, text me." She had never used it. Until now. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision. She typed 3 words. "I need help." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she hit send. The message delivered instantly. A gust of wind blew past her, lifting her braids slightly. She closed her eyes and let the cold settle into her skin. She didn't know if he would come. She didn't know if she wanted him to. She only knew she couldn't go back. Not to that apartment. Not to that man. Not to that life. A notification buzzed on her phone. Message read. Her heart skipped. Somewhere across the city, Hyun was staring at her message. Somewhere across the city, a man who ruled the underworld was standing up because she finally called. Anna exhaled slowly. "This is it," she whispered, like a narrator speaking through the storm. If you're already hooked by Anna's secret life and the storm she's about to unleash, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. She didn't know how long she stood there. Minutes, seconds. Time felt strange, heavy, electric. Then she heard it. The low, smooth purr of an engine. A black car turned the corner, its headlights slicing through the rain. It slowed as it approached her, stopping right in front of her. The back door opened, and Jae-hyun stepped out. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He walked toward her with the calm confidence of a man who had already decided what he was going to do. He held an umbrella over her head, shielding her from the rain instead of himself. His eyes softened the moment they landed on her. "Anna," he said quietly. Her breath caught. He looked at her suitcase, then back at her face. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. "Who hurt you?" She swallowed hard. "My husband." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, but beneath it, something else. Something warm. Something she hadn't felt in years. He stepped closer. "You're not going back," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever." She shook her head. "I didn't call you for revenge." "I know," he murmured. He reached up and brushed a raindrop from her cheek, with a touch so gentle it made her knees weaken. "You called me because you needed someone who wouldn't leave you outside in the rain." Her chest tightened. He held out his hand. "Come with me, Anna." She hesitated, not out of fear, but because she felt something she wasn't ready to name. But she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, firm and protective. And as he led her into the car, she realized something. She hadn't just sent an anonymous text. She had opened the door to a new life. If you want to see how Jae-hyun reacts when Anna finally lets him in, hit that follow button. Things are about to explode. The car door closed behind her. The city lights blurred outside the window, and Anna felt the first spark of something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The city lights streaked past the car windows like blurred memories Anna didn't want to revisit. She sat in the back seat beside Hyun, her hands resting on her lap, her fingers still tingling from where he had held them. The warmth of his touch lingered, unsettling her in ways she wasn't prepared for. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched her, his gaze steady, protective, and unreadable. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged, thick with everything she wasn't ready to say. Finally, he broke it. "You should have called me sooner." She turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. "I didn't want to drag you into my mess." His jaw tightened. "You think this is a mess?" "Anna, I've handled wars. I've handled betrayals that would make your husband's little stunt look like a child's tantrum." She looked away, her voice low. "It wasn't about him. It was about me. I chose that life. I chose to walk away from everything." "And now?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't know how. The car turned sharply, heading toward the quieter part of the city. Anna watched the buildings shift from bright commercial towers to dim residential blocks, then to the sleek, shadowed district where the powerful hid their secrets. Jae-hyun leaned back, his voice softer now. "You're shaking." "I'm cold," she lied. He reached over and pulled his jacket off, placing it around her shoulders without asking. The fabric was warm, heavy, and smelled faintly of cedar and something darker, something that reminded her of nights she had tried to forget. She swallowed. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You called. That's enough." If you're still watching Anna's journey unfold, don't forget to like and subscribe. This story is only getting deeper. The car slowed as they approached a tall, glass-walled building with no signs, no lights, no indication of what it was. But Anna knew. She had seen places like this before, safe houses for people who lived in the shadows. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Jae-hyun exited first, then extended his hand to her again. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His grip was firm, grounding. Inside, the building was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that came from soundproof walls and expensive security systems. The elevator ride was silent, but Anna felt Jae-hyun's presence beside her like a shield. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse that overlooked the entire city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, soft lighting. It was beautiful, but not in a way that tried to impress. It was beautiful in a way that felt safe. Jae-hyun watched her take it in. "You can stay here as long as you need." She turned to him. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said immediately. "You never could be." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." "Start by breathing," he said. "Then eat." Then rest. Everything else can wait. She let out a shaky laugh. You sound like my brother. His expression shifted. He doesn't know yet, does he? No, she whispered. And I don't want him to. Jae-hyun stepped closer, his voice low. Anna, he's going to find out. The Queen Empire doesn't sleep. She closed her eyes. I know. He reached out, gently lifting her chin, so she would look at him. When he does, he'll come for you. And when he comes, he'll come for me too. Her breath caught. I didn't mean to drag you into this. You didn't drag me, he said. I walked in. She stared at him, her heart pounding. Why? His answer was immediate. Because I care about you. The words hit her harder than she expected. She stepped back, overwhelmed. Jae-hyun, don't say things you don't mean. He followed her, slow and deliberate. I don't say anything I don't mean. She shook her head. You don't understand. My life, my family, it's complicated. I know exactly who you are, he said. Anna, I've always known. Her eyes widened. What? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You think I didn't know who you were the moment you saved me? You think I didn't know the bloodline you came from? The Queen Empire doesn't hide well. She felt the room tilt. Then why didn't you say anything? Because you didn't want that life, he said, and I wasn't going to be the one to pull you back into it. She stared at him, stunned. He took another step toward her. But tonight you called me, and that means something. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. He reached out again, slower this time, giving her space to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. You're safe now. Her voice cracked. I don't feel safe. You will, he said. I promise. If you're feeling the heat between Anna and Jae-hyun, hit that follow button because this is only the beginning. Anna stepped back, needing air. She walked toward the window, staring out at the city. Her reflection stared back at her strong, tired, beautiful, broken, and rebuilding all at once. Jae-hyun stayed behind her, giving her space, but not distance. She whispered, I don't know who I am anymore. He answered softly, You're Anna, the woman who survived a loveless marriage, the woman who walked away from an empire, the woman who still stands. She closed her eyes, tears finally slipping down her cheeks, not from weakness, but from release. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. And you're not alone anymore. She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. For the first time in years, she believed him. Anna didn't know how long she stood there, staring at the city lights as if they could tell her who she was supposed to be now. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside her hadn't. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, grounding herself, breathing slowly, trying to keep her thoughts from spiraling. Behind her, Jae-hyun watched her with a patience she wasn't used to. He didn't push. He didn't demand answers. He simply existed in the room with her, steady and unshakable, like a wall she could lean on without fear of it collapsing. Finally, she spoke. He didn't even look at me when he closed the door. Jae-hyun's voice was low. Cowards rarely look at the consequences of their actions. She let out a bitter laugh. I thought I was enough. I thought love was enough. He stepped closer, but not too close. Love is enough, but the wrong man will make you believe it isn't. Her throat tightened. I gave him everything. I gave him the best of me. And he didn't deserve any of it. She turned around sharply, her eyes burning. Don't say that. Why not? He asked calmly. It's the truth. She shook her head. If I admit that, then I have to admit I wasted 3 years of my life. He took another step toward her. You didn't waste anything. You learned. You grew. You survived. That's not wasted time, Anna. That's strength. Her breath trembled. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel it, he said. You just have to be it. She stared at him, her chest rising and falling too fast. Why do you care so much? He didn't hesitate. Because I've seen you. The real you. Not the version you try to shrink yourself into. She blinked, stunned. You don't know me. I know enough, he said. I know you walked away from an empire because you wanted peace. I know you chose love over power. I know you gave your heart to a man who didn't know what to do with it. And I know you're standing here now, still fighting to breathe. Her voice cracked. Stop. Why? He asked softly. Because I'm right? She turned away again, unable to hold his gaze. I don't want to talk about this. Then we won't, he said. Not until you're ready. She exhaled shakily, grateful for the out. He walked past her and headed toward the kitchen. You haven't eaten. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten, he repeated, opening cabinet. Sit. She frowned. I said I'm not. Anna, he said without looking at her. Sit. Something in his tone, firm, protective, not controlling, made her obey before she could think. She sat at the counter, watching him move around the kitchen with surprising ease. He wasn't the type of man she expected to know where anything was, yet he moved like he owned the space. He placed a bowl of steaming ramen in front of her. Eat. She stared at it. You made this? Yes. You cook? When I need to. She raised an eyebrow. You, the infamous hyun? Mafia boss? Killer of men? Maker of noodles? He smirked. Eat before I change my mind. She picked up the chopsticks, her lips twitching. You wouldn't. He leaned on the counter, his eyes locked on hers. Try me. She took a bite, and the warmth hit her chest instantly. She hadn't realized how cold she was until that moment. She closed her eyes, letting the flavor settle, letting the heat spread through her. He watched her quietly. Better. She nodded. Yeah, good. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. It wasn't just the food, it was the feeling of being cared for, the feeling of being seen, the feeling of being safe. When she finished, she pushed the bowl away. Thank you. You're welcome. She hesitated. Why are you being so nice to me? He tilted his head. Do you want me to be cruel? No, she said quickly. I'm not used to this. You should be, he said. You deserve it. Her heart thudded painfully. Stop saying things like that. Why? He asked again. Because no one else ever did. She looked down at her hands. Because I don't know how to accept it. He walked around the counter and stood in front of her. Then learn. She looked up slowly, meeting his eyes. It's not that easy. It doesn't have to be, he said. It just has to start. She swallowed hard. Jaehyun. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Anna. Her breath hitched. I don't want to fall apart. Then don't, he said. Fall forward. She blinked. Into what? Into me. Her heart stopped. He didn't touch her. He didn't push. He just stood there, offering himself like a place to land. She whispered, I can't. You can, he said. You just don't trust yourself yet. She shook her head. I don't trust anyone. He nodded slowly. Then let me earn it. Her eyes widened. Why? He exhaled, his voice dropping. Because I've been waiting for you to call me since the day you walked away. She froze. What? He looked away for the first time, his jaw tightening. I told myself I wouldn't interfere. I told myself you deserved the life you chose. But every day, I wondered if you were happy. And every day, I hoped you weren't because I wanted you to come back. Her breath caught. Jaehyun. He met her eyes again. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting anything. I just want you to know the truth. She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. He stepped back, giving her space. You don't have to say anything. She didn't. She couldn't. She just sat there, trembling, overwhelmed, and more alive than she had felt in years. If you're feeling this moment, hit like and subscribe because Anna's story is only getting more intense. Anna stood slowly, her legs unsteady. I need air. He nodded. Balconies open. She walked toward the glass doors, her pulse racing, her mind spinning, her heart cracking open in ways she didn't understand. Behind her, Jaehyun watched her go, his expression unreadable. But one thing was clear. He wasn't letting her fall alone. Anna stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her skin like a quiet reminder that she was still alive. The city stretched out beneath her, endless lights, endless noise, endless possibilities. She gripped the railing, her knuckles whitening as she tried to steady her breathing. Behind her, She heard the soft click of the balcony door closing. Jae-hyun didn't follow her outside. He stayed inside the penthouse, giving her space, but not distance. She could feel him watching her through the glass, his presence a steady pulse behind her. She closed her eyes. Why does everything hurt so much? Her voice was barely a whisper, but he heard it. She knew he did. He slid the door open and stepped out, his footsteps slow and deliberate. Because you love deeply, he said, and when you love deeply, the wound cuts deeper. She didn't turn around. I shouldn't have loved him that much. That's not your fault, he said. It's his. She let out a shaky breath. I feel stupid. You're not. I feel weak. You're not. I feel lost. He moved closer, stopping just behind her. That, he said softly, you're allowed to feel. She opened her eyes, staring at the city. I don't know who I am without him. You were someone long before him, he said, and you'll be someone long after. She swallowed hard. I don't know how to start over. You don't have to start over, he said. You just have to start. She turned slowly, her back pressing against the railing as she faced him. His eyes were dark, intense, but gentle in a way she didn't expect from a man with his reputation. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Anna, he said quietly, you're not broken. She shook her head. I feel broken. You're hurt, he corrected. There's a difference. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to heal. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to let yourself. She looked down, her voice trembling. I don't want to be alone. You're not, he said. Not anymore. Her breath hitched. Why are you doing this? He exhaled slowly. Because I care about you. She shook her head. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. I know you're strong. I know you're loyal. I know you're brave. And I know you deserve better than what you were given. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. Stop saying things like that. Why, he asked. Because no one else ever did. She looked away, her voice barely audible. Because I don't know how to believe it. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Then let me show you, he said. Her heart pounded. Jae-hyun. He stepped closer, his hand cupping her jaw gently. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting anything. I just want you to know you're not alone. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch without meaning to. I'm scared. I know, he whispered, but you're safe. She opened her eyes, meeting his. I don't trust myself. Then trust me, he said. Her breath caught. I don't know if I can. Then let me earn it. She stared at him, her chest tightening. Why? He hesitated, then spoke with a vulnerability she didn't expect. Because I've been waiting for you. Her eyes widened. What? He looked away, his jaw clenching. The day you saved me. I knew you were different. I knew you weren't meant for the life you chose. But I respected it. I respected you. I told myself I wouldn't interfere. But every day, I wondered if you were happy. She swallowed. And now, he said, meeting her eyes again. You called me, and I'm not letting you fall alone. Her breath trembled. I don't know what I want. You don't have to know, he said. Not tonight. She looked down at her hands. I feel like everything is slipping. He stepped closer, placing his hand over hers. Then hold on to me. She looked up slowly, her eyes searching his. Why does this feel dangerous? Because it is, he said, but not in the way you think. She frowned. What do you mean? He leaned in slightly, his voice low. I'm not dangerous to you. I'm dangerous for you. Her heart skipped. Jae-hyun. He stepped back suddenly, giving her space. You need rest. She blinked, thrown off by the sudden shift. What? You're exhausted, he said. You've been through hell. You need sleep. She shook her head. I can't sleep. You will, he said. I'll stay here. I won't leave. Her chest tightened. Why are you being so gentle? He looked at her for a long moment. Because you deserve gentleness. She felt her throat close. I don't know how to accept that. Then learn, he said softly. One night at a time. She stared at him, overwhelmed. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, he said. You never could be. She exhaled shakily. I don't know what happens next. He stepped closer again, his voice steady. Whatever you choose, whatever you want, I'll stand beside you. Her eyes softened. Why? He smiled faintly. Because I want to. She looked away, her heart pounding. I'm scared of wanting anything. He nodded. Then want nothing. Just breathe. She let out a shaky laugh. You make it sound so easy. It's not, he said, but you're not doing it alone. She looked at him again, really looked at him. The man who ruled the shadows. The man who could destroy empires. The man who stood in front of her like she was the only thing that mattered. She whispered, Thank you. He nodded once. Come inside. Rest. She hesitated, then followed him back into the penthouse. The warmth hit her instantly, wrapping around her like a blanket she didn't know she needed. As she walked past him, he spoke quietly. Anna. She turned. He held her gaze. You're safe here. For the first time in years, she believed it. If you're still with Anna on this emotional journey, hit like and subscribe because the storm is only beginning. Anna walked deeper into the penthouse, her steps slow, her mind still spinning from everything Hyun had said. She felt like she was floating and sinking at the same time. Every breath felt too heavy, every thought too loud. She stopped near the edge of the living room, staring at the soft glow of the lamps, the quiet hum of the city outside, the stillness that wrapped around her like a fragile cocoon. Jae-hyun watched her from a distance, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. She turned slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? He pushed off the wall and walked toward her, his steps measured. Now, he said, you rest. She shook her head. I can't rest. My mind won't stop. Then let it run, he said. Let it scream. Let it break. You don't have to hold everything together tonight. Her throat tightened. I don't know how to let go. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to try. She looked away, her voice trembling. I feel like I'm drowning. He stepped closer, his voice low. Then let me be the one who pulls you out. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. I don't want to depend on anyone. You're not depending, he said. You're healing. She opened her eyes, meeting his. I don't know how to heal. Then let me help you, he said. She swallowed hard. Why? He didn't hesitate. Because you deserve someone who won't walk away. Her breath caught. I don't know if I can believe that. Then let me prove it, he said. She stared at him, her heart pounding. You're making this too easy. He shook his head. Nothing about this is easy. Not for you. Not for me. She frowned. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly. Anna, you're not just any woman. You're the heir to the Queen Empire. Your existence alone shifts power. Your choices ripple through the underground. You think this is easy for me? She blinked. I didn't ask for any of that. I know, he said, but it's still yours. She looked down at her hands. I walked away from that life. And now it's walking back to you, he said. Her head snapped up. What? He nodded toward her phone on the table. Your brother knows. Her heart stopped. How? You used the emergency line, he said. The Queen Empire monitors everything tied to you. They know you're in trouble. She felt the blood drain from her face. No, I didn't want them involved. They already are, he said. They won't interfere directly. Not yet, but they're watching. She shook her head, panic rising. I didn't want this. I didn't want them to come for me. They won't, he said. Not unless you ask. She pressed her hand to her forehead. This is too much. He stepped closer, his voice steady. Anna, look at me. She lifted her eyes slowly. You're safe, he said. No one is coming through that door unless you want them to. She swallowed. My brother, he'll be angry. He'll be protective, Jae-hyun corrected. There's a difference. She let out a shaky breath. I didn't want him to know. He had to. Jae-hyun said. You're his blood, his responsibility, his queen. She flinched. Don't call me that. Why? He asked. Because it scares you. Because it's not who I want to be, she whispered. He stepped closer, his voice soft. Then be who you want to be, not who they expect. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. I don't know who that is anymore. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then let's find her. Her breath trembled. Jae-hyun, he held her gaze. You're not alone. She closed her eyes, letting the words sink into her chest like warmth she didn't know she needed. When she opened them again, he was still there, steady and unshaken. She whispered, I'm scared of what comes next. He nodded. Good. She frowned. Good. Fear means you're alive, he said. Fear means you're moving. Fear means you're not numb anymore. She stared at him, stunned. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. Come, sit. She followed him to the couch, her legs heavy, her mind buzzing. She sat down slowly, sinking into the cushions. He sat beside her, not too close, but close enough that she could feel his presence. She whispered, I don't know how to be okay. You don't have to be okay, he said. You just have to be honest. She looked at him. Honest about what? About how you feel, he said. About what you want. About what you're afraid of. She swallowed. I'm afraid of everything. He nodded. Then start with one thing. She hesitated. I'm afraid of being alone. You're not, he said. She looked down. I'm afraid of trusting someone again. Then trust slowly, he said. She took a shaky breath. I'm afraid of falling apart. Then fall, he said. I'll catch you. Her heart thudded painfully. Why are you doing this? He leaned back slightly, his eyes softening. Because I care about you. Because I want you to heal. Because I want you to see yourself the way I see you. She blinked rapidly. And how do you see me? He smiled faintly. As someone worth fighting for. Her breath caught. Jae-hyun. He stood suddenly, his expression shifting. Someone's watching. She froze. What? He walked to the window, scanning the buildings across the street. Your brother's men. They're keeping their distance, but they're here. Her stomach twisted. I didn't want this. I know, he said, but they're not here to take you. They're here to protect you. She stood slowly. This is too much. He turned to her. Anna, listen to me. She met his eyes, her chest tight. You're safe, he said. With me, with them, with yourself. You're not trapped. You're not hunted. You're protected. She exhaled shakily. I don't know what to do. He stepped closer, his voice steady. Then do nothing. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. She nodded slowly, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. He reached out, brushing her arm gently. Come, I'll show you the guest room. She followed him down the hallway, her steps heavy, her mind foggy. He opened the door to a quiet, warm room with soft lighting and a neatly made bed. He turned to her. If you need anything, I'm right outside. She nodded. Thank you. He hesitated, then spoke softly. Anna. She looked up. You're safe, he repeated. She swallowed hard. Good night, Jae-hyun. Good night, he said. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. For the first time in years, she let herself collapse onto the bed. And for the first time in years, she slept. If you're still with Anna on this journey, hit like and subscribe because part 2 is where everything changes.